Morning, everybody. Deb, are you up? Sarah, Deb, who's doing this?
That's Lee here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this morning we just wanted to recap for you House File 718 and the impact that would have on Polk County's budget and our budgeting process. So the main provisions that impact us are the bill adjusts the maximum general basic and rural basic levy rate caps. And that's really the most significant impact on the county. I'm going to save that one towards the end of our discussion. We'll take the easy ones first. It creates a homestead exemption, a new one for property owners over the age of 65. We'll talk about each of these in a little more detail. It increases the amount of the military service tax exemption and eliminates state funding to replace lost revenues. It replaces the proposed maximum tax dollar resolution with direct mailings instead to property owners. And it requires a separate public hearing on the proposed property taxes, limits bond referenda to November, and also requires notice to be mailed to voters, and additionally revises various bonding limitations. So a lot about changing how taxes are levied, the tax base, and also changing the public notice requirements. So looking at one of the easier ones, although it does have some cost impact for sure, is the new homestead exemption. So in addition to the existing homestead credit, there is a new homestead exemption for property owners who are over the age of 65. In 24-25, which is the budget we'll be talking about next January, that exemption amount is $3,250 per qualified homeowner. The year after, it changes to $6,500 and it stays at $6,500 from there on. There's no state funding to replace any revenue that we lose from that. And my estimate currently is that in the first year, we would lose $565,000 in property tax revenue, and it would double in the following year when it goes up to the $6,500. About half that loss occurs in the general basic fund. The remainder of that would be spread over to the rural fund, the property and the debt service fund. This is based on an estimate of 26,000 homeowners receiving that exemption, which is our current estimate based upon voter registration records. I assume there will be additional people that file in addition to what we currently have. And also my dollar estimate does not include the rural basic levy rate. I purely looked at the general levy rate. So it'll be higher. The dollar amount lost will be higher than this. On the military service credit, that amount is increased from $1,852 to $4,000 per qualified homeowner. And the state discontinues its funding. It had previously funded any revenues that we had lost for that. This was not nearly as financially impactful. It's a revenue loss estimate of $46,000. Then on the public notice side, we will now have a March 15th deadline to file with the Iowa Department of Management some forms that they are going to require for us to specify certain information that we have to provide on what our proposed property taxes are. Then 5 days later, the county auditor will be required to mail notices to each individual homeowner with the consolidated information from each of the taxing entities that talks about the proposed property taxes.
We're mailing something to everyone?
And a 5-day turnaround.
What the hell?
So that mailing that goes to the homeowners will include what our current year property tax amount is and the current year levy rate.
Oh my God.
Then what our proposed year effective levy rate is. So what if in the upcoming fiscal year, we levied the same dollar amount as we levied in the prior year? What would that levy rate be based upon the increase in valuation? So that would show if currently we're levying $3.50 for the general basic fund and it brings in $100 million, but property valuations go up, in order to keep that same $100 million revenue coming in, our levy rate would have gone down. That's what this one shows. Then the next thing we have to show is what are we actually proposing to levy as a dollar amount and as a levy rate. And then if there's any increase at all in the property tax dollars compared to current year tax dollars, we need to provide a detailed statement of the major reasons for the increase, including the specific purposes or programs for which the political subdivision is proposing an increase. And then this mailing needs to include an example of what the current year taxes are and what they would be under the proposed property taxes on a $100,000 home and $100,000 commercial property. So how is the proposed tax rate that the county is proposing, how does that compare to what their current taxes are? And then a date, time, and location of a public hearing that will be held on this information that is mailed to them.
God.
This public hearing that is required has to be separate from any other county, county meeting. So you have to have a separate meeting for this. And it needs to occur after the mailing goes out, but because we have to certify by the end of April now, it has to really occur by the end of March. So there's like a 10-day window there for us to get this public hearing held. At the public hearing, you'll receive comments, and then you can proceed with, you can proceed with your proposed taxes. You will have to now then have a second public hearing, just like we currently do, to actually go ahead and certify the budget. So we've got to get this one out of the way first, and then we'll authorize the second public hearing to certify the budget. Once we've held this public hearing, we can decrease our taxes, but we cannot increase from what we've just said at the public hearing. So same thing we've been doing for the last few years. On the bonds, now any bond issuance that requires a public referendum, which are the bonds typically that are general county purpose rather than essential county purpose, those can only be held at November elections, and a notice must be mailed to every registered voter informing them of our intent to issue these bonds. We have not historically issued this sort of bonds. We've generally done essential county purpose bonds. But there are times when we've normally done essential county purpose. Some things might be general county purpose though. So this could impact us depending upon if we change what we're issuing bonds for. So say, if we were to do a large capital project, something that is more than the 1.5 million currently allowed as an essential county purpose, that would impact us here. That notice that goes to the voters would require us to say, provide an estimate of the annual increase in property taxes if the bonds were to pass. It also says, this legislation does have one beneficial piece for us. Beginning in 24-25, the threshold for the amount that we can issue for a capital project per project increases from 1.5 million to 1.95 million as an essential county purpose, so not requiring a bond referendum. And then going forward, we will need to file an annual report with the Iowa Department of Management that includes a listing of all the bonds that were issued, the amounts, what the purpose was, whether an election was held, and also a list of what other bonds we've previously issued relate to that same purpose. Okay, now to the more difficult ones. The general basic and rural basic levy rate caps are adjusted. Currently, they're at $3.50 for the general basic and $3.95 for the rural basic as the maximum amounts. Going forward, if our taxable valuation is less than 3%, there's no change in what we can levy. We can still levy $3.50 as a maximum and $3.95 as a maximum. However, if our taxable valuation increases between 3% and 6%, then we have to go through a calculation that essentially reduces our allowed growth to about 2%. If our valuation growth is more than 6%, another calculation that limits us to about 3% growth in our taxable valuation. And we'll work through an example here to show you how that works. Just so you know, on average, in a non-reassessment year, we typically get about 3.5% increase in taxable valuation, so we'd be falling under the 2% growth cap. And in reassessment years, we typically have around 7.2% increase, so we'd be limited to about 3% growth under this formula. If there is a year when we have less than 3% growth, we can go back to the 350, and that's our new starting point going forward. The other levy rates are not impacted, so the general supplemental, the rural supplemental, and debt service levy rates are not impacted. Those continue to be uncapped, but authorized for specific purposes only. So here's an example of how that the new general basic cap would be calculated for 24-25. Assuming that next year we have valuation growth between 3% and 6%, then we have to take, okay, let me see if I get this, it doesn't work. Okay, we basically look at what dollar amount did we levy in taxes for 23-24, which was $104 million, $100.4 million. and we had taxable valuation of $28.7 billion. That was our levy rate cap of $3.50. In 24-25, we'd look at the same dollar amount of taxes, but now we have to divide that those tax dollars by the previous year's taxable valuation times 102%. That gives us our new levy rate cap. That gives us a levy rate cap of $3.43 in the general basic fund as opposed to $3.50. However, if next year the valuation goes up more than 6%, now we have to divide our current year tax dollars by 103% of the previous year tax base, which brings our levy rate cap to $3.40. Given that 24-25 will have the reassessments in there, I believe we'll be closer to this, the $3.40 cap for 24-25. The interesting thing about this levy rate cap is it has a tiered effect. There are some points in time when you're better off having less growth. So if we stayed at $3.50, we would have about a $3 million increase in our tax revenue. But if we go to just 3.1% increase in taxable valuation, now we've fallen into this category where we have to do the calculation that brings our levy rate cap down to $3.43. $3.43 versus $3.50 only generates $1 million increase in tax dollars versus $3 million increase in tax dollars. So that kind of continues until you get to about 5.9% increase in taxable valuation. At that point in time, you're now better off having more growth as opposed to just 3%. This slide compares what we would have seen prior to House File 718 versus what we can anticipate after House File 718. The red boxes at the bottom indicate that we normally would see about a $3.5 or $7 million increase in tax revenues based purely upon growth in tax base. Now going forward, we're likely to see closer to $1.5 to $4 million increase in revenues based on that same growth in tax base. But our levy rate caps have been reduced. Those levy rate caps carry forward as the new starting point for the following fiscal year, unless growth is less than 3%. So 24-25, we're estimating $3.40 as a general basic cap. That's the new starting point for 25-26. We again have to do that calculation. We'd bring us down to about $3.33 as the levy rate cap in 25-26. In 26-27, we'd be down to $3.23. And 27-28 down to $3.17. These are all estimates, and I don't want anyone to be totally frightened, but these are my current estimates of what the impact of this bill would be. Legislation says that in 28-29 we go back to $3.50.
Well, why?
I don't know. To appease us, but I don't know.
Just your guesstimates are based on historical averages, so
Absolutely.
they're not unreasonable estimates.
Right. Yeah, I took the average over 5 years and factored those in.
Now, isn't there a difference between residential, the way they approach residential and commercial properties? I mean, commercial property taxes.
It's all based on our tax base. So this is a levy rate that I applied towards the aggregate tax base.
And each percent is worth about, what, $300,000?
Well, each penny, so if I go down from $3.50 to $3.43, each penny is about $300,000.
I thought.
So by the time we're down to $3.17 as a cap, we have $11 million less than we would have received if we were still at the $3.50.
Let's say that again. $11 million less?
Than if there had not been House File 718. If we were still able to levy $3.50 in 27-28, we would anticipate bringing in $11 million more than the $3.17.
That's a hit.
So
$11 million.
every year we're ratcheting down the amount of growth compared to
$11 million worth of growth we would have seen.
that. I took that against the increased growth. So I increased the tax base by
Right.
whatever percentage and just applied that reduced cap to it.
He's not patenting it. I mean, this is what they did to us.
Yeah, and if you think about, if previously we would have had $3 million in 1 year, but now we only have 1.5. or we would have had 7 million in a reassessment year, but now only have 4. You just keep adding those up over, in one year we lose 1.5 million, another year we lose 3 compared to non-House File 718. So just keep adding that up on a cumulative basis.
Every year.
And as a reminder, these are the levies that pay for our operating expenses. So our staff, our benefits, all of those things. So there's not much flexibility to shift those expenses to other levies. Correct?
Yes, correct, except benefits do come from the
Right.
supplemental.
Question, and I see Amy in the audience, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I don't necessarily expect you to have an answer. Did any legislator, this is convoluted, right? Did anyone, legislator, ever express what their intent they were trying to accomplish with this change?
Kind of. They wanted to have more predictability in the taxpayers, what property taxpayers saw in their tax payments. They were trying to create more predictability, and they couldn't do it on the assessment side, so this is how they did it. They just felt the whole bill was transparency to the taxpayer and predictability in their bill.
Creates huge unpredictability for county governments. Yeah.
And Deb, do you want to share the stat about what the level of growth is that we need to keep up with, like wage increases?
So each 1% increase in the cost of employment or of personal services costs about $1 million. And also we need a 1% growth in valuation to keep up with a 1% increase in the cost of personal services. So we need to see same percentage growth in valuation as we actually pay out in personal services growth. And then also whatever other expenditures might go up on, jail medical contract is one that goes up a couple $100,000 every year, just so other inflationary increases.
Well, where are we gonna get that?
Yeah, I don't know. So my thought is, right now, we're okay. We're in an okay position. We reworked some things during this upcoming budget year to make sure that we can manage, we're already addressing the couple $1 million shortfall from the other change they made. So we got ourselves in an okay position right now. And we can get through for a little bit. We have some time to take a deliberate approach to how we're gonna manage this going forward. We're going to have to make some changes. We cannot continue the rate of growth that we've had in the past based upon this new tax legislation.
You mean we can't continue to spend the way we were? Not growth, the way we were spending?
Yeah.
Both.
25, 26 looks like it's gonna be a messy year. That's the one that scares me. That's a non-reassessment year, so we're gonna be in that limbo of the between 3 and 6% where we're going to have loss. It's gonna be very limited growth in our tax revenues there. Also, they're gonna roll in the second half of that elderly tax exemption. So we're gonna have to lose another couple $100,000 on that. And it's gonna be the final year of phasing out commercial industrial revenue replacement. So another 600,000 comes off of there. My guess is that year, we're only gonna see about 600,000 growth in our tax revenues based upon the levy rate cap and what the change in the tax base would be. So
Wow.
we're going to need to look at some cost containment and some creative solutions to think about how we're going forward. But we have time. We're okay for a while.
Cost containment, that's a great term.
But
You said there was, there's some levy rates that remained uncapped, general supplemental, rural supplemental, and debt service.
Correct.
What falls, remind me, what falls into the general supplemental? What's in there, for example?
It's courts, elections, employee benefits, court-ordered services for juveniles. Those are the main ones.
Not insurance. but-
Insurance, I'm sorry, yes, insurance and risk management.
Right. Okay, and with respect to the mailing issues, that seem kind of like micromanaging to me, but that's all right. Can the treasurer's office send something like that out already?
They send a statement that shows, once everybody's already certified their budget, what is each taxing jurisdiction, what
Year
amount.
over year, kind of, yeah.
and that comes out with the property tax bills. But this is before you,
Get a bill. This is before you get a
This is
bill.
different than
before you've
that.
certified your budget, just to let people know what we're thinking of doing.
And that's all it is, really, is, hey, just to let you know, this is what's gonna happen to you.
Yes?
Basically.
And here's the date and time of the hearing.
So, watch out, everybody.
So if you're living in some little tiny wide spot in the road, it's not a big deal, but if you're living in Cedar Rapids or Des Moines or someplace like that, it's a huge deal. What it boils
I
down to.
mean, that just doesn't make any sense. That's what we have that's what we have notices for in the paper. I mean, how much is that gonna cost to mail out? Jamie?
120,000 is what Mary says.
It's 120,000 for Mary. The estimate the Fiscal Bureau gave is $1.50 per mailer. So it's anywhere from about 112,000 to 300,000 because we don't have the forms. We have to send it for every jurisdiction, not just the county. So we got the cities, we got the schools. So I have my staff right now working on a working group at the state, trying to make this into as cheap as possible, into an 8.5 by 11 sheet that can be tri-folded with a 5-day turnaround. That also becomes, you know, for vendors, that's let's hit the button hard. So anywhere between 112 to about 300,000 is what our estimate. On the bond issues, we'll have to send the actual bond language to every voter. We have requested the Secretary of State for clarification, whether we can household it, or what do we do on inactive voters? Because right now we have 107,000 inactive voters. Just put it at $1, it's 107,000 extra dollars. They're inactive. Maybe they missed an election, maybe they've moved. So we have a lot more questions than we have answers right now. But if we could household it like we do other mailings, that'd be very, very beneficial. And to be clear, the only ones we'd be paying for would be the county ones. If the city of Des Moines does one, they'd have to pay their share of that. But the real problem we're gonna run into is we're running out of ballot space on general election ballots. You know, think of all the judges, broad lawn, soil and water, ag extension on the back, township trustees. Now you have bond issues. It's gonna be troubling.
What was the intent of changing the bond requirement amount for essential county purpose? Was that supposed to be helpful or something if we're not generating any revenue?
I don't know, they increased the limits 30% for, across all the different types of bonds that are currently restricted by dollar amounts.
Yeah, nice of 'em.
I don't know.
But shit, you still gotta pay for it, and how are we gonna pay for it if we don't have any money coming in?
That's right.
I mean, that's a joke.
That's right.
So if I'm a city, I'm just plugging their 810 limit is, their limit's 810, so I just plug that in instead of 350, right? I mean, I
Correct.
could read this the same way if I just plugged in 810.
Right.
Same requirements, everything else. So really, I mean, this kind of is micro level. If you're 3.1, it makes a difference if you're 2.9, right?
Absolutely. And a
So-
city has the ability to have,
And all of our
Control.
cities, including Des
More.
Moines, are growth cities.
yeah,
So what's the point of growing? The question of the month, right?
yeah. I know.
And they are all growing,
Yeah, right. Well,
but
why,
they're gonna get penalized.
why would you though?
Oh, God, don't get me started. Oh, why would you?
Okay, well, this has been pleasant. Is there anything more?
That's all the good news I have for today.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions out there?
Yeah.
Tighten up your budget's what I say.
I think it even goes a little bit deeper than that, but. Okay.
John's got
Yeah,
something.
John?
Yeah, since we have all department heads, and I think most elected officials here, we have a department head meeting July 12th. We'll probably discuss this more, and what precursor is to the budget process. We'll figure out by this fall implications of what we may change. We'll also have a discussion about a big HR piece there. One is, the class comp study won't be done yet, but we may get an update, and I hope I think you've probably done your meetings, but if you haven't, please cooperate and get all that stuff done. It's critically important that everyone in your departments fill out those, PDQs or whatever they are, and so we can keep that on schedule. And then we'll talk about a pretty deep dive in July about employee evaluations. So just to give you a heads up on July 12th. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, thanks, everybody.